All right, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to Muslim Network TV. This is your brother, Muhammad Maxwell Hassan, host of Canada Today Youth Edition. And for this show, this is a good one. It's going to be a good one. And I think it's a question that's on everyone's minds, at least in some point in their life. You know, as we're going through life and we have our different career paths, some people say that you got to be a jack of all trades, master of none. It's better to be a generalist. I mean, after all, with coronavirus, if it's taught us one thing, is that the more adaptable you are, the more skills that you have, then the better off you're going to be. But on the other side, you got people on the other camp that says that the best highly paid professions are those that are specialized. You have surgeons, a very specialized field, and all sorts of things. So what a discussion. What do you do? Do you become a generalist or do you become a specialist? What's the way we can go and navigate through this? So with us here today to explore that topic in depth is two very, very special co-guests. Mashallah, with us here today as a guest, his brother Siraat Mustafa. He's a second year law student. And oh, by the way, I got to tell you a little thing to our viewers here. We go way back. I mean, mashallah, we are high school students too. So just to give you a heads up, this is going to be a familiar face, little high school reunion. So anyone who's in BCSS watching this, you know, you got that going. So he's a second-year law student at the University of Windsor Faculty of Law, born and raised in Toronto. Siraat immigrated from Pakistan with his family in 1996. He graduated from York University in 2015. During his undergraduate time, he was involved with community outreach and student advocacy, specifically on McLaughlin College Council, where he served as the president of the student government, mashallah. And after graduating from York University, Siraat worked for a full-service Bay Street law firm in downtown Toronto, where he worked for not 1, but 2 years before beginning his law studies. And during his free time, he loves to cook. You won't believe it. He loves to cook traditional homemade recipes and work out to clear his mind. He's a die-hard Toronto Maple Leafs and Raptors fan. Go Raptors, go Maple Leafs, and loves to spend his free time with his nephew. Aslan, mashallah, it's awesome not just to be a familiar face, man, but awesome to have you here to dive into this topic about specialization versus generalization. And with us here today as well, we got a special co-guest. She was on the show before, Sister Maariyah Baig. She obtained her law degree at the University of Kent in England and is currently completing the law licensing process in Ontario, hoping to be qualified as a lawyer soon, inshallah. And prior to studying law, Maariyah was heavily involved with My Voice Canada. She recently returned to the youth organization as an alumnus and member of the advisory board. She currently lives in Toronto, Ontario. Awesome to have you on board as well, Sister Maariyah. We're going to be having quite a lively discussion about this whole generalization versus specialization. So now let's go ladies first, if I may, Sister Maariyah. For those viewers who may not be aware of, your story, in a nutshell, could you kindly walk us through how you got to where you are career-wise?
For sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on again. I enjoyed it last time, so inshallah, hopefully it'll be a fruitful discussion this time too. So like you mentioned in the intro, I am a law licensing candidate right now because I completed my law degree overseas. But before I decided to pursue law, while I was in high school, I had a lot of different passions and hobbies. So the advice that I was given by peers, mentors, teachers, parents, anyone I turned to, was two different kind of chunks of advice. One was find your passion and pursue it. The other was find something stable and be realistic. So it was a challenge for me at that time because I was interested in so many different things. And the way I went about trying to figure out what to do for the rest of my life, which is a very daunting thing for any teenager, was to try to explore as many things as I could. So I tried to get involved in different extracurriculars. I volunteered with different organizations, whether it was Islamic organizations or things related to the arts, things related to sports, things related to social justice. And then when I went into university, I basically planned on doing a general degree. That's what I wanted to do, so that I could keep my options open. And then I decided that instead of having to decide at the age of 18, 19, basically, which is, when students are trying to figure things out, they've graduated high school, some take a gap year, some go to university right away. I thought, okay, let me look at my passions and see if there is a common thread amongst them. And that's kind of what led me to law initially. So I didn't come to law as a, die-hard out of grade 9 or grade 10 wanting to pursue this. It was something I discovered during my undergraduate studies. And I volunteered a little bit at a law firm just to make sure that I knew what I was getting into. And I essentially told myself that, okay, this is what you're going to do now because this makes sense right now, but don't forget about your other passions. And I kind of put them on the back burner, but at the same time kept them alive in a way. And now, several years out, I am, working on becoming licensed, inshallah, but I'm also working on those other things that I had always been interested in. And I guess the difference between myself and someone else who would just be focused on law is that if you ask me, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? I have no hesitation saying, oh, I see myself back in school, or I see myself in a different career. And that thought doesn't scare me, or it doesn't, make me think that I won't be successful one day, inshallah. It just tells me that this is a lifelong journey and I'm at the beginning of it.
Amazing. So it sounds like you kind of dabbled in a number of different things, and you had that common thread that traced back. So it's almost like you connected the dots backwards. There you are. Now on the flip side, brother Siraat, man, Siraat, I gotta tell you, back in high school, I remember law was the one thing. I remember you carrying those books, and like law was always on your mind. Talk to us, man. Like, how did law, like, from even at that early age, what made you keep going all the way until this point? Like Sister Maariyah, she kind of had to find her way and go through. What made you like laser focused on law?
Well, first of all, Jazakallah, Muhammad, for getting me onto the studio. It's a long time coming, and Sister Maariyah, it's a pleasure to meet you. And some of the stories you mentioned, very similar to my journey as well. Before high school, even, I'm going to take you back to the 4th grade when I went to a little process through a speech competition, and my 4th grade teacher told me that I'd be a great lawyer one day. So it started from the age of 10, but of course I dabbled around in different areas as I grew older, and coming into high school when I met Muhammad, and we went through all these different factions. I think the law just always inspired me to continue this path. My grandfather was a lawyer too, so my dad naturally would share, the stories of my grandfather, and that really inspired me to pursue this passion. I realized quickly that accounting wasn't for me, so that I knew for sure. But going into university, one thing that I did was I kept my options open, and that really speaks to the topic today about generalization and specialization. And what I found the most interesting in my journey was things kept changing. So whether or not I pursued law as a practice to be an aspiring lawyer one day, currently in law school right now, I always look towards, what else is out there? What are the alternatives besides being a lawyer? And my conviction in my experiences actually brought me back to pursue this path. And currently I'm enjoying it to the fullest. And it's virtual online law school, but it's been a treat so far in terms of just learning from people from all walks of life. And the journey it's still going. So I'll tell you to check in on me maybe in a year from now, because I'm still in 2nd year, but so far so good, alhamdulillah.
Man, that's amazing. It sounds like you kind of had law in your veins, the grandfather, and there you go. Like, it's just continuing on in those footsteps. But likewise, it's not like you're just going through the motions just because. It sounds like you genuinely sink your teeth into it, even though you had those little, those sparks, especially from 4th grade, that kind of planted that seed that eventually grew and got to where you are now, and that you can look back fondly and say, yeah, you know what, it seems like it's fairly consistent throughout. Very, very cool. I'm going to stick with you, Siraat, because nowadays the whole world has changed, especially in the last year. I'm curious to know your thoughts about, particularly because this show is mainly dealing with Muslim youth. In your opinion, what would you say? How do Muslim youth, in your observations and in your based on your experiences, maybe not necessarily just limited to law, but in general, what would you say are some of the things? How do Muslim youth look at careers? Do they look at it in a specialized way? Do they look at it in a general? What's your take on that particularly? You can feel free to draw from your experiences in law too.
Yeah, so for me, coming in, just like the background is that my family, we immigrated from Pakistan in '96. We lived in Toronto and East York, and I went to an elementary school called Thorncliffe Park Public School, for those of you who know, heavily populated with the Muslim community. And those are where my roots really started. And essentially, I remember, the aspirations of what a career looked like from an early start, because of the fact that my parents, really brought that foundation at home. And those skills were really taught at home. And I think I can relate to that experience talking more generally about, the youth, because I would be surrounding myself around, other kids who would be, talking about, no one really talked about what they wanted to do in university, but, we would always talk about what we want when we grow up. And in fact, one of the stories that I remember very fondly was at a family friend's home, and all of us, kids were sitting around in the living room, and we were all going in circles, like one by one, what do I want to be when I grow up? And this is slightly embarrassing, but I remember saying that I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. And, at that time, my I call her auntie, she specifically said, lawyers are liars. And like, I was kind of flabbergasted. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to take this back home, because that's where I learned everything. Right. So I go ask my dad, I'm like, hey, Dad, Baba, why are lawyers liars? And he obviously smiled. He didn't have, he didn't get taken back by it, but he taught me something very important in that moment. And that's about the profession. The fact that lawyers are, X, Y, Z, specifically, this is how he's been trained from his father, to watching him as a lawyer. And, the whole rhetoric just kind of made me build a very strong conviction about the law. And I think, generally speaking, when you go back into these spaces, whether it's in school, on the playground, in the masjid, in the community, wherever I was growing up, one thing for sure I always knew is that the foundation was on the educational level, that I knew I had to go, pursue college and university. And not many people today, living in 2021, will necessarily agree with that. They'll look at formal education. It's a hot debate too, to see, where we end up, whether we take the route for college or university, or whether we get a trade skill. But I think, more generally speaking, the viewpoint of an education for the youth today, and I'm speaking to, based on my own experiences, is a positive one, is one that, there is hope, because there's so many opportunities now to get involved and to try different things. There's not a linear path. I know I chose a profession that does somewhat look like a linear path, but the journey, like Sister Maariyah was saying earlier, it's definitely not a linear path. And there's so many ways to get involved.
Very cool, man. Lawyers are liars. I mean, that's cool. I mean, it's very cool how that story ties into a lot of the stuff that for any lawyers watching, man, it is what it is. No, it is. I mean, but where does that come from? I'm curious. I mean, like, maybe just to expand on that, maybe, yeah, Sister Maariyah, look like you can chime in on this too. Where does that come from? Like, lawyers are liars. Is it just what's the origin of that? Or maybe just to unpack that a bit more. Is it an old wives' tale, so to speak? Like, what's that all about?
I have no idea, but I was gonna say, Brother Siraat, like, I've heard that so many times. So I don't know if you know where that comes from, but I guess it's just this, maybe people are a little bit bitter. You could say it's the bitter people talking, but the idea is that, lawyers are people who have to tell a very convincing story. And that's, if I had to, explain what we do in a non-technical manner, or what we're studying, both of us are studying towards becoming, it's that you take a set of facts and you are convincing the other side. So you're not lying. There's always two sides to every story. But I think that sometimes things can be taken out of context, and viewers or other people who don't understand the legal field, or how, the type of work that lawyers do, they just take it as, oh, lawyers are liars. Because how can you have two people on opposing sides saying completely opposite things about the same thing? So I mean, that's what I think.
I see. So, Brother Siraat, do you have anything like you want to take on that, and maybe Sister Maariyah, will go back to you about, like, what's your general observations about specialization and generalization? So, do you have anything to say?
I agree, and I think that the misconceptions, again, it comes back from what you learn at home, and learning about it from home for me was a very rich experience because of my upbringing, and I think ultimately, it was a light joke. It was very lighthearted in that sense, but I still rub it into family jokes and stuff like that. But it's definitely, I agree with Sister Maariyah. There's two sides, and it's the job of your advocacy to bring out the truth, and that's exactly what we do in this profession.
Yeah, but what if you can't handle the truth? What if you can't handle it?
There's a whole trial process for that one. You have to go through the law itself. So
Yeah, my man. I mean, those courtroom drama scenes, I mean, we can dive into a lot. I mean, I guess one day you just want to picture yourself standing before a jury, standing before a judge, and you start pounding the table and you say, "Do you think I mean, it's all fun and well, but I mean, I'm sure that's a conversation for another day." But Sister Maria, if I can take it back to you, your observations, do Muslim youth, are they like dead set, straightforward from day one, and they're like, "I want to be X," and they do it? Or is it more like, I really don't know what I want to do? Or, I mean, what's your general take on that part, like about the whole career specialization versus generalization?
Yeah, I think it really goes off of what Brother Siraat was saying in terms of your environment. So, mashallah, like he came from a family that had a lawyer, these things were discussed and stuff. But in general, when you speak to youth, Muslim youth, or at least from what I remember from my high school peers, colleagues, was that people were confused. People were quite confused. And you kind of had two camps where there were, again, people who wanted to pursue their passions and felt like, there's got to be a way to make this work, even if I'm not going to make a lot of money. And then there was the other camp of people who just, picked something that they thought was stable. And the people who fell in between, who were trying to, do a little bit of both. So I guess you could say it's kind of like the realists versus the dreamers in a way, almost. And I hate doing that. I hate pushing, people into two different camps, but I remember seeing a lot of that. I remember that the students who needed to take more time to figure things out either did a lap year of high school, they went back to high school, or they took a gap year after high school, didn't necessarily, jump to college or university or anything. They just said, I need to figure things out. And then you had other students who were just very, very focused. And mashallah, like you were saying, grade 4, mashallah, someone told you, Brother Siraat, that you'd make a great lawyer. I've heard lots of stories like that too, where, I have friends and colleagues who said that, oh, I knew I wanted to do this from ages ago. To me, that's like so surprising because, it took me a lot longer to figure out what my path would be. But yeah, I think the general trend from what I saw was just that you have generally two camps and that people are split between them. I also think that our generation, subhanAllah, has a lot more options than the previous generation did. And I think that that plays a role as well. If you talk to people of the previous generation, our parents, our grandparents, this idea of choosing something you like and pursuing your passion is so foreign. It's just like, what do you mean? What do you mean pursue your passion? What do you mean you're taking a year off after high school to go travel the world and figure out what you like? It just wasn't common in their time. So I think that also is something that makes students even more confused, or youth even more confused, because there are just so many options now.
I see. Yeah, too many choices is a problem. In some cases, you have too many choices. If you're in a buffet and everything looks good, you don't know how to start, and you might end up starving yourself because you're in this. I think the phrase is analysis paralysis. You've heard of this before, like where you're paralyzed because you have too many things to analyze. So I hear you loud and clear, mashallah. Although 2020 brings forth a whole lot of golden opportunities, sometimes too much choice can be a bad thing. Let's shift gears for a second, and Brother Siraat, let me talk to you about the dangers, the pitfalls, the traps. In the beginning, I mentioned that sometimes where people, yeah, it's a good thing to specialize in one thing, but it's a double-edged sword because, let's say, I'll give you an example where in this whole coronavirus situation, let's just say if someone is trained all their life in one particular thing, and then a pandemic hits, laid off, involuntarily, pink slips everywhere. And now what? I got to reinvent I've been working in this field for 40 years. Now suddenly I got to reinvent myself. I don't know what else to do. What would you say are some of the pitfalls with regards to specialization, or it may be or it may be one side, like, to just simply dive in, but could you offer some insight into maybe what are the not so great things, just so people can have a balanced approach about for those who would choose to specialize in something?
Yeah, I can definitely take a stab at that. From the get-go, I think a lack of understanding of the power of what mentorship offers, I think, is a huge opportunity for you to look at your career not in a micro way, but in a macro way. And to dig more into that, I often heard this quote when I was in university that a lot of people are running in one direction to nowhere, and it really hit me once I started to realize the path that I was choosing, and just being able to have these conversations with my peers and even with my family members. Specifically, one pitfall is that we are kind of nurtured in a way to learn and remember that there was also a time when colleges were also looked at as like the inferior quality to going to university, and that stigma also exists. And colleges offer a lot of apprenticeships and a lot of hands-on skills that are actually making a ton of money and having a lot of fulfilling careers, despite the fact that they didn't have a university degree. But that's a conversation for later. I think more so just in terms of how students, when they leave high school, there's this big question mark. I stayed back for an extra year in university. I completed a certificate program as well in public administration because I really wanted to understand government and how those things operated, and those systems that were in place. How do we work in hand with public administration and the law? Aside from knowing that ultimately I did want to go to law school, but I think this attitude of investing in yourself really is one of the pitfalls that we don't seem to add more emphasis to. And I think we have to give our brothers and sisters a lot of exposure, whether that's finding a mentor early, and I highly recommend that, or giving them opportunities to get involved. I'm a product of serving my community, and what I found the most fulfilling, aside from my formal education, it was giving back to my community. And now, Brother Muhammad, you probably remember in grade 10, going back to French class, all those skits, they definitely paid off because we imagined and we dreamt about, the opportunities that we did, but that was in the classroom. And then we went out and we acted upon it by getting involved. And I think that was the key, that we actually did something about it. We didn't just sit there and stay idle. So getting involved in your community as well is something that may not necessarily be as attractive to those who are looking for their path, but there are tremendous opportunities that are beyond the classroom that are offered just by getting involved. And those are two. I would say the third thing would just be to completely refocus and realign. It's okay to fail. That's completely fine. I think rejection and failure and adversity are things that I personally look at as open-ended, possibilities. Again, I'm just for the record, I didn't get into law school the first attempt. I had to try multiple times in order to get in. But you have that conviction to keep applying and to keep working hard and to keep refocusing. I think there's an appetite for the long-term goal, but the effort's only short-term. And getting a mentor early and getting involved in your community are just some anecdotes that I think are very important, especially for the Muslim community, to stay involved.
Very cool, mashallah, man. I gotta say, rejection is just redirection. Am I right? You know what I mean? So that's an awesome way to put it. And I like how you mentioned that with specialization, we may box ourselves into one specific thing, and then that's it. What do I do? But if you have a bird's eye view of the field itself, then it's not like it's the end of the world if, let's just say, you're realigned or refocused in a different area. I mean, let's just say, for the sake of argument, if let's just say someone is so focused on IT stuff, IT is a very specialized field, and if all you're into is one certain thing, and then again, poof, it's gone. But if you have that bird's eye view of what IT is all about, not that narrow focus, then you're going to be okay. You'll survive and adapt. Is that speaking to what you're saying? Just to make sure you get that straight.
I think a bird's eye view is important, and not having that. If you're not able to fly, if you're just in the cage and you're just stuck, you're not really able to. These analogies can go on all night long. We're just gonna have to put a pause to that. But I love how you haven't gotten rid of those analogies. It's been a decade and you're still good with it. So I'll let you have that.
Oh, thanks, man. That's the way I like to look at it. You gotta have vivid imagery, and especially, as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you gotta paint that mental picture, and I think that gets people going. So very nice, man. So Sister Maariyah, talk to me. Now let's go at the flip side. I mean, the obvious, I'm gonna just address the elephant in the room here when it comes to generalization, is that some people say time wasted. Oh my gosh, if I only started this 10 years ago, then I would have saved, who knows where I could have gone. Maybe that's one sort of maybe pitfall, perhaps. What's your take on this whole issue on the generalist side? What are some pitfalls of someone who spends too much time not figuring out and just what are you doing? Well, I'm just waiting for the next thing. I'm just doing the next thing. What would you say are some of the negative sides of that approach?
I guess I would start by saying it all depends on your intention. So I'm going to actually start with a little bit of positive before I get into the negative. Someone who's, I guess, a generalist, or maybe someone who wants to do a lot of different things, hopefully that's coming from a place where, you know, they want to do a lot of good. They are just excited about what they can do to, you know, help their community, help their family, and the different avenues that they can pursue are endless. And so hopefully it's coming from a good place. That being said, the pitfalls, I would say, are exactly like you said. It's that idea of, you know, saying that time was wasted and I could have become an expert in this area, or I could be making so much money in this area, or I could be doing A, B, and C, climb the, you know, the ladder. In law, it's very much like, oh, did you make partner at a big firm? What age did you make partner at a big firm? But it comes back to the individual. So it always comes back to circumstance. So if you're the type of person who is happy with, you know, a different definition of success, and like I'll stick to the example of law since we're both in law. If I'm not interested in making partner at a firm by a certain age, and I don't consider that necessarily, you know, a measure of success, why do I need to be panicked and, you know, worried about, oh my God, why didn't I go to law school at this age, and then, you know, try to get an articling, you know, position at this age, and et cetera, et cetera. I think you have to look at your circumstance, look at your intention. And I'm going to go off of what Brother Siraat said, is that just continue to engage with your community. Like that's a really, really big thing, is stay open-minded. I guess my advice to generalists would be that as long as your intention is in the right place, and as long as you stay open-minded to opportunity, you'll be okay. The danger is kind of looking back at the, you know, the roots and the path that you took and seeing that as a waste of time. So it doesn't matter what the people around you are saying. It doesn't matter if, you know, the auntie in the masjid is saying, you know, where are you at now and what are you doing now? You should focus on your own intention. I would say that there's a balance between being open-minded to different opportunities and also being focused. So I think that the thing that people always kind of put between, like, you know, someone who specializes and someone who's a generalist is like, oh, well, that person was really, really focused. They knew what they wanted to do from day one. They went after it, and look at where they are now. Whereas you didn't know what you wanted to do and you've been floating around and then you figured it out. Well, what's wrong with that? I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, as long as you know what you want out of life, as long as you have your goals in place, and as long as your purpose is something bigger and better than anything that someone else can, you know, define. So I don't know if I really answered your question in terms of pitfalls, but I guess the main thing is just that, you know, sometimes people's opinions and comments will get to you, but you should stay focused in your mind in terms of what you want to do. Because even if it looks like on the outside that a generalist is all over the place and has their hand in everything, maybe that person actually has more of a plan than you think they do.
Wow, what a cliffhanger. Oh my gosh. Who knows? You know, there's going to be, you know, stay tuned to be continued. It's like, that's a, you know, Spot, like there's so many things running through my head as you say that. You know, the first that comes to mind is, I'm going to paraphrase a quote from Michael Jordan. You know, Michael Jordan, he said that I never ask if, because you never see the flip side of that. You know, and so Paul, it reminds me even of Hadith of Prophet, don't ask, oh, if only this, if only that, because that opens the doors of shaitan. Because then you start looking at yourself, because if you look back at your life, I look back at my life, if we didn't have the experiences that we had, would we be the people we are today? Right? And so if you see you look at a negative traumatic experience and you say, oh, how could that person go through that? Well, I mean, if they didn't go through that, they wouldn't be who they are today. So I guess maybe even those points of, I think it speaks to what you were saying about the intentions and how that goes. Siraat, looks like you want to chime in on that, man. It looks like you want to add something to this. Yeah.
purpose. I think that has kind of been the model for me too, and it comes with a deep conviction in knowing what you would like to practice. And there are so many areas of, and I go back to law again, but there's so many areas that are so niche, like for example, mining and intellectual property and trademarks. These areas are not necessarily, a generalist would not necessarily jump in. You have to be specialized in these areas, but you would have to have, a deep sense of conviction in the practice to be able to go forth with it and really be interested, because by then you'll lose interest if you don't like that area of law. But more generally speaking, I think just like having youth be given the opportunities and the resources early, I think that would really set them for success. And I bring in my my French skills because Brother Muhammad and I also shared that because we were both in the same French class back in grade 10. And presently today, like that's a skill that I'm working on. But had I not gone out there and looked for the resources early, for myself, by investing in myself and having that purpose to make that skill set greater, then I would still be here sitting with regret, being like, oh, I wish I knew how to speak in French. But I want to make sure that change happened. And the only way that change happened was by essentially reaching out to those who are in the field. So long story, winded version of saying that there has to be purpose. And I really do agree with Sister Maariyah when she said that.
Very cool. You got to move with purpose, and going back to Michael Jordan for a split second here, only because I think it's a nice way of contrasting these two. Like, you have Michael Jordan, who didn't start off with basketball. For a lot of people, they say he's well known as he started off with baseball. So you can say that he dabbled in a different sport. He wasn't destined for greatness from day one. But if you look at the late, great Kobe Bryant, what did he want from day one, right? He knew basketball was his thing. I know these are maybe an anomaly. These are exceptions. These are outliers. I mean, in terms of the massive success. But I think the thought process, I think that could speak to a lot of where people fit in. Do you see yourself as someone laser focused and saying, I was put on this planet for X. I was put on this planet to be the world's greatest, and then fill in the blank for yourself, or somebody saying, you know what, let me test this out, test that out, and then eventually mold themselves into who they eventually would become world renowned for. SubhanAllah. So I'm looking at that dichotomy, and it's really, there's no conclusive answer. That's the weird thing. There's no answer to the back of this textbook that you can just look at and say yes, because you'll find success here and there. I guess it's like going back to what Sister Maariyah is saying, and it reminds you of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ saying that actions are judged by intentions. If your intention is whack, then forget it. If your intention is good, you do your best and leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very, very cool. So touching on what Brother Siraat was saying about resources, talk to us, man. Let's just say there's a brother watching this and he's like, man, Siraat, look at you, that $1 million suit going, that $1 million smile. I want some of that, that success. I want that sort of mindset. And what are some resources out there that you would find useful to help people guiding through their path in terms of making sure that they make the right decision? You mentioned mentors, you mentioned some quotes that helped you out. Are there other resources that you can point towards and say, you know what, this would be really helpful for you to help you make the decision? If I knew then what I know now, what would you say are some resources? And then I'll take it to you, Sister Maariyah, for that too.
Yeah, so for anybody who's looking forward to propelling, no matter where you are in life in terms of your direction, I don't think it's ever too late to get started. I'm blessed in the way where I'm surrounded by individuals who come from all walks of life, and they share their stories in these virtual classes that we're having right now. I have a student who is 55 and they're pursuing their law degree. So it really doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, but it's that deep conviction that we've been talking about today. And some resources that I found very helpful, especially speaking to today's time, stuff that I may not necessarily have had, in high school or just early days of university, which wasn't super long ago, but things have definitely changed in the world of post-COVID-19 with all the new innovations. I think aside from mentorship, one of the other ways is really investing in yourself by, surrounding yourself with a specific community. That might mean to, specifically join, there's hashtags on Twitter, for example. If you follow #law Twitter, there are folks from all walks of life, lawyers, paralegals, legal professionals looking to get involved. And I'm sticking with the legal narrative here because that's sort of the journey that I've been on. But if you're looking to specifically add a skill set, social media has been an evolutionary perspective on getting involved. Look at the stocks right now, based on the knowledge that we're receiving with everything going on. Whether or not you like stocks or not, you can definitely dabble into that information, because information is really the crux of the move that I'm trying to propel here, is that you have the information in front of you. So it's about getting involved. So the law Twitter hashtag is great. If you're an aspiring law student, or if you want to get involved with the legal community, there's a lot of candid discussions that are not necessarily within the schools, because when I was applying, I would be looking at these very non-verified sites like Law Students, which I was told to stay away from, but that was the only source I had. Lawstudents.ca was not certainly verified at the time, but now Law Twitter has really taken over and given us the real deal of what it's like to be working as a law student, working as a first-year lawyer, as an associate, and folks come all around with that hashtag. But other than that, maybe I'll pass it on to Sister Maariyah, and I'll come back if you want, just to brainstorm some more ideas.
For sure. Okay. So basically, like, that's a really good resource that you brought up. I was going to say, I wish I had known about more resources when I was, trying to figure things out. I recall going to my guidance counselor. That's usually a good place that students start in high school. I know with COVID, things are a little bit different, but you still have access to guidance counselors. Even if you don't have the best experience with them, or they can't necessarily give focused advice because they're dealing with so many students, it is a good place to start, because they can provide resources to you. They can direct you to maybe somebody else who has a little more information. So if you're a high school student, starting with your guidance counselor is a pretty good place. The other thing is, going off of what Brother Siraat was saying, is whatever you're interested in, try to join that community. So if it's law, then he's listed off a great resource. But if it's anything else, try to reach out to, whether it's family members, friends, parents, your teachers who maybe taught those subjects. It could be neighbors. It could be literally anybody. In your community. Try to reach out to people who are currently working in the fields that you're interested in. So not just students, because students can give great advice, but students are also on their journey. So if you're talking to someone who's studying in law school, for example, or studying in med school, they're going to have a very different view of the field than someone who has been in practice for 10 or 15 years. It's great to be able to, shadow someone. Obviously in these times, again, it's a little bit more challenging, but I'll give the example just of myself. Like I said, that, this is a journey that I'm on, and I'm still interested in keeping other passions alive. So another passion of mine is creative writing, and a third is teaching. So I myself, as a generalist, make sure that I keep those circles engaged, so that I'm talking to people who are actually teaching on the ground during this COVID time and seeing what their experience is like, talking to writers who are published. It's something that I do on the side, along with pursuing my law licensing process, because I know that that's something I'm interested in. So definitely tapping into, you'd be surprised basically what the people around you can offer you. Even just a 30-minute conversation with them can open up your mind, maybe get you thinking about things that you didn't know or think about when you thought of that field initially. And who knows, it could even open up opportunity. Someone might reach out to you later down the road and say, hey, are you still interested in this area? Because, there's a volunteer position that's opened up in this office or at this organization. So yeah, definitely networking.
Wow, look at that. The world is your oyster, you know what I mean? And nowadays with the coronavirus situation, if we look at the flip side, I mean, you can be sitting in your, right here and in front of a screen, and there's no reason not to reach out to as many people as you possibly could have. So, subhanAllah, as always, I hate to say it, it's bittersweet, but all good things must come to an end. And for you two, mashallah, it's been phenomenal having this conversation. Love hearing things from the law's perspective, and it's amazing to see what you two have become and where you're planning to go. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you both immense success. But as always, I want to leave you both with an opportunity to share some gems of wisdom. So let me take it to Sister Maariyah, then we'll close off with Brother Siraat here. Sister Maariyah, there's a sister right now watching this. She's confused. no idea what to do with herself, no idea where to go. Maybe law seems to be something on her mind, maybe not. Maybe she's interested in this, maybe she's not. She's indecisive. She can't decide. What would be your final piece of advice for her in order to make those steps to move forward and to really grow into the person that she needs to be?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a great discussion. Alhamdulillah, I've learned a lot through it. If I were to get a chance to talk to that sister who's confused, I think what I would say is it's okay that you have not followed or you are not following a cookie cutter path. It's okay to not know exactly what you want to do straight out of high school and to apply for that, university degree and then postgraduate degree and then job. Just know that even if you don't follow the cookie cutter path, doesn't mean you don't have a plan. So have an idea of what you want out of life. Have an idea of what your purpose is, what your goals are. The difference between you and someone else who perhaps knows exactly what they want to do, from the get-go, is just that their answer to the question, where do you see yourself 10 years from now, is going to be different from yours. And that's okay. So I would say have confidence and have belief in your intentions and be positive and don't say no to new opportunities. But at some point, you're going to want to start narrowing down based off of what you want out of life, based off of the bigger purpose that is your life. That's probably what I would say. That's what I wish I could say to myself, 10 years back.
Very cool, very cool. And now to close the curtain, man, Siraat, like a little high school reunion here. But again, let's just say someone's watching this, sees you and sees your way, and like mashallah is really inspired by your perspective on life and is looking for some guidance, looking for some advice, looking for some answers. I think that's the key. They don't have enough answers for themselves. What would be your piece of advice for that individual, for that brother to get his life on track so that way he can make leaps and bounds in whatever he wants to pursue?
Jazakallah, Muhammad. Again, thank you for having me as well on the show, and it's been a privilege to be with both of you today. And one thing I would say is, trust the process, write things down, and make sure you review everything based on what you've written, and be honest about your intentions. Like Sister Maria was saying, I'm just going to echo that. You don't have to have a specific path, but you definitely need to remember being complacent does have its flaws, and there are consequences for that. So when you're starting, make sure you aim big and you aim for the sky, and then you narrow down, how can I achieve this in 1 month, 6 months, and a year? Where do I see myself from 5 years? Moving the cliche out of the way, you really want to write those down, because I think writing your goals down is one of the most powerful ways to act up upon it. It's something that I've been doing for a very long time, and manifesting that into your truth, allowing change to happen depending on where you end up, whether you decide to practice law, a specific skill set, any career really. You just have to make sure you invest in yourself. And the one thing that I learned the most, and this is something I share, Brother Muhammad, we went to high school together, and I would like to also add that he was also someone who was very vibrant in class and someone who always decided to take the extra mile. But you have to continue being that personality, being that person, have that deep conviction in yourself. If you think you're great, you don't let anybody else make you think otherwise. You're great, right? So in order to get to that point, take that conviction forward, and don't worry about others' opinions about your choices. As long as they're halal and they're appropriate and they're legal, but make sure that you are following a path that you have deep conviction in, and write those goals down. And 2020 and 2021, if it's taught me anything, aside from the gratitude and perspectives that I've shared with my brothers and sisters and my family specifically, it's that a lot of change is coming. A lot of change is coming even in the legal profession. Law firms specifically are not going to be the same. But one thing is for sure, you have to remember what your value add is. And by investing in yourself, the sky's the limit.
Look at that, man. Mashallah, what a way to cap it off. The sky is the limit. You know what they also say? Don't tell me the sky is the limit when there are footprints on the moon. Am I right? Mashallah, that's amazing to see. Like, you got it, my man. I like that. But investing in yourself, knowing your worth, you got it all. Mashallah, what a package. What a way to close it out. Thank you again, Brother Siraat. Thank you again, Sister Maria, for both of your insights. Awesome, awesome, awesome insights. And, hopefully, inshallah, for those of you tuning in, by all means, feel free to, see and gather this information to make the most of your next steps. Now let me talk to the viewers. Yeah, here we go. That's what I'm talking about. Now, Mashallah, we talked about careers, we talked about specialization and generalization. As we say that there's no real answer. I mean, like in terms of a right answer, you have people that are successful on both sides. But there is one thing that is certain. There is one thing that is true. There is one thing that is timeless, and it's this. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You don't throw a million bricks up in the air and hope that everything works out and you'll magically build a house. Everything takes planning. You do your best and you leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it takes you 5 years, whether it takes you 10 years. KFC started when the man wasn't a senior citizen, you know what I mean? So there's hope for everyone at the end of the day. But at the same time, we want to also balance that out by saying, you don't know, tomorrow is never promised. So working on that path, having that sense of urgency, but being kind to yourself and knowing that, the end will be what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is destined for us. Inshallah, we'll find our true path and get going with that. So thank you again so much for tuning in. This is your brother, Muhammad Maxwell Hassan. Tune in on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Canada Today Youth Edition. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.